about his brand new book, Return of the Gods.
It's time for The Line of Fire with your host, biblical scholar and cultural commentator, Dr. Michael Brown. Your voice for moral sanity and spiritual clarity. Call 866-34-TRUTH to get on The Line of Fire. And now, here's your host, Dr. Michael Brown.
Thanks for joining us, friends, on The Line of Fire. Michael Brown, delighted to be with you. I will not be taking calls today because I've got my guest, Jonathan Cahn, with us for the entire hour. His new book just came out, The Return of the Gods, already a bestseller. And Jonathan will be doing wall-to-wall interviews, but he'll always contact me a few months before one of his books is about to come out so we can schedule a full hour for all of you right about the time of the book's release. So as always, Jonathan, it is wonderful to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us on The Line of Fire.
Great to be with you, Mike, always. It's always a joy.
So before we dig into the contents of this book, I just wanted to share something with you. I will sometimes listen to Audible books of my own books when they come out, just to kind of give me a different feel and refresh my mind. And I decided some months back for the first time to listen to The Harbinger on audio. At a certain point, I didn't want to listen because it was too disturbing to read and hear about judgment. And then I had the identical feeling a few months later listening to the book of Ezekiel. It was too disturbing, but I knew it was true. I knew the subject of judgment, divine judgment, was true. Jonathan, how did writing The Return of the Gods affect you as you were learning these things and seeing these things? How did it affect you?
Well, Mike, on one hand, there's a few different realms of it. On one hand, it's, I'm blown away by it. Like I'm the first one to be blown away by, what comes. Something comes on my heart, and then I see, then it leads to this, and I see, whoa, this is real. And, so that the one part of it is I'm amazed, really. I'm amazed by the Lord. And on the other hand, it is, there's a chilling aspect of it. There's a scary aspect of it. And there was, almost a reluctance, because I was saying, Lord, this is heavy, and I knew if this goes out, there's going to be also repercussions as well. There's going to be backlash because it's hitting all these things. So I had a lot of mixed feelings in that, and also the other thing is that I was trying to do a book once a year, and that's kind of what I was doing, but I couldn't do this one. This one there was so much number one warfare about me doing it, and it was kind of like plowing through snow. There was just so much weight. So I have mixed feelings. On one hand, I'm again amazed and wow, Lord, wow, my mind is blown. On the other hand, the implications are very big and heavy for our world in this hour.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what I would expect, Jonathan. All right, so just to lay out the big picture, what is revealed in The Return of the Gods?
It is revealing a mystery behind literally, virtually every transformation that's been taking place in the last 60 years in America, in the West, what is transforming our culture, our children, our school system, our government, our worldview. The change the dramatic change we've been watching, and that could this go back, number one, to the Bible, which of course it does, ancient times, but also to the ancient tablets, inscriptions of Mesopotamia, Middle East. Could this go back to the gods? And what are the gods? And, of course, the gods, there's this mythology, there's fiction, but could there be something real linked to the gods of the Bible? And the Bible actually says there is. And what if these things, there's a reality to them, could they, if they exist, could they be at work now? Could they return? And if so, what would happen? And so this could it be behind everything? Could it be behind Supreme Court decisions? Could it be behind what's happening in children's cartoons? And could it affect everyone listening, every believer, every non-believer? And if so, what does it mean, and what do we need to do about it? That is what The Return of the Gods is going to reveal.
I was flying a few years ago and saw two movies that had just come out, and they were both about the Greek gods. And they were now, they were being worshipped, but they were interacting on the earth. And I thought, how curious is that? And then other things, when I wrote Jezebel's War with America about the same demonic spirits that were operating 3,000 years ago, operating again. Paul says in 1 Corinthians that the gods of the nations are demons. So when you speak about the mystery of the spirits, what is that?
Yeah, and it's right in line with that, Mike. The Bible clearly says that. First, in the Hebrew Scriptures, in Deuteronomy and in the Psalms, it says that what the nations or pagans are worshiping or offering their children to are the Shedim. And Shedim is a word speaking of entities. Actually, the Babylonians and the pagan cultures saw the Shedim or the Shedu to them. They saw them as, they could be good spirits, bad spirits. In the Bible, it's only malevolent spirits. When that word was translated into Greek by the rabbis or the scholars, they translated it into the word daimonia, which, of course, we get the word demonic or demon. And then, exactly as you said, Paul then says the same thing, but he uses the other word. He says that what they're worshiping, the idols, they're actually worshiping the daimonia, and that's demonic or demon. And so one of the things is that the gods were all around, in pagan culture, and what the Bible's saying is that there is a link to the spiritual world. And we would think that we should think that anyway. Of course, if people are worshiping other things, there's a spiritual link, and it's not saying that what they were saying, their mythologies were right. Of course, it's fantasy, but that there's a link between these things, and even the spirits could play on the mythology, and the mythology can follow certain aspects of the spirits. The Bible says we are at war. There is a spiritual realm, and this is what they were doing without knowing it.
All right, so there would be the fantasies about this God has this power, that God has that power, but behind the fantasy was demonic activity, and that demonic activity certainly could affect individuals. We know about individuals being demonized or demon-possessed in Scripture, but how far can demonic activity go? Can it affect nations, civilizations? It's kind of a strange phenomenon that all around the world, no matter what the culture was, they're all worshiping gods. I mean, it's kind of a strange thing, but it was all over, except pretty much for Israel. And then when Israel turned away from God, then it changed. But so if behind the gods, in one form or another, are spirits or spiritual or principalities, then what it means is if a civilization or a culture is given to the gods, they're given to the spirits. And one of the things I found is that in researching this, that the phenomenon of possession is all over. It's not just that the Bible speaks about it. Virtually all these cultures in some way speak about it. And the closer you got to the gods, the more these things would manifest. The Oracle of Delphi, the high priest, they would be shaking and convulsive and foaming. All the signs of possession. They said they were possessed by the god, but they were possessed by the spirit. So it is not just the individuals; it was the entire culture was in a sense possessed. When you look at the signs of possession, and you look at pagan culture, you see it complete throughout. And so, there is a very important aspect of civilizational possession, or that spirits can infect entire cultures and nations. So, if we think, say, Romans 1. And people worship idols instead of the one true God, and God gives them over to idolatry, then into all kinds of foolishness, then sexual immorality, then sexual perversion and other sins. So they're not just being given over to the flesh then, they're being given over to demonic powers, right?
Absolutely, and when you look at much of pagan worship, you see a real parallel to what we know as demonic possession. I mean, even human sacrifice, mutilations, all the convulsions, self-destructiveness. You see that all these are linked to possession.
All right. So at a certain point, the polytheism of much of the world, outside of like the Hindu faith and things, but which you had in the ancient Greco-Roman world and the ancient Semitic world, a lot of that is displaced by monotheistic faiths. But where did the gods go? Where did the spirits go?
Yeah, well, and the big change is Messiah, is Yeshua, is Jesus, because that is taking not only the faith of Israel, it's the new covenant, but the power is going forth to the world. He had the power to cast out spirits, and then he sent the disciples into the world, into the pagan world, and you have this clash, and with that, it's really literally a war of spirits. You have the spirit of God versus the spirits of the world, and you have the word versus mythology, and that's why really, the first believers were persecuted or thrown to the lions because they would not worship the gods or offer incense. So it was really a battle of spirits, or quote, the gods. And so, because of the gospel, and it was that really alone, the gods vanished. The temples of Zeus, the shrines of Athena, they would be emptied out, and they ended. The gods ended, but if behind the gods are spirits or principalities, then spirits don't end. So they have to. They're existing. So the interesting thing, Michael, and this is where a key I speak about in the book called The House of Spirits, and that is that Messiah, Jesus, gave a parable, and he speaks about the spirit that comes out of a man, and he says that, it goes into the dry places looking for a place and doesn't find it. It says, I'm going to go back to my house, goes back to the man called the house, says finds the house clean, swept, and the implication is an empty, and gets 7 other spirits worse than itself and repossesses the man or repossesses the house, and then Messiah says that so the latter state will be worse than the first. Now we take that, and it's true. If someone knows the Lord and then turns away, it's risking something much greater or darker, and with possession as well as just in turning away from the Lord. But what he says is, so it will be with this generation. Yeah. He wasn't just speaking about one person. And so, therefore, now, if you take that to the biggest thing right now, Western civilization was once given to these spirits and gods. The gospel cleansed it. It was in a sense the greatest mass exorcism in history, and that's why Western civilization is so unique because of that. But the warning is, if the West, or any culture that has been so cleansed, America or the remainder of the Western civilization, if it ever turns away from God, if it ever turns back, then what it's saying is, the house is not going to remain empty. It will be repossessed. And the spirits that were driven out will come back to it. And in a sense, the gods or the ancient entities will come back to repossess it. And that is exactly what we have been witnessing.
All right, we're gonna stop right there. And that verse that's just been shared with us from Matthew 12, very jarring. That's what's going to happen to that generation. Jesus warned then, it's relevant today. We come back, we'll talk more about the return of the gods, tell you where you can get the book for yourself. Stay right here.
The war on women. Who's really waging this war that we hear about in these political ads?
This is True Commentary with Stu Epperson, host of Truth Talk Live.
I have to tell you, I get pretty upset when I think about the women that could have found the cure to cancer, that could have won the Nobel Peace Prize, that could have been president of these United States if they were allowed to live. And yet, so many of these politicians are attacking other politicians who are pro-life because they're waging a war on women. Wait a second. How about your war on women, Mr. or Mrs. Candidate, when you not only want them to be aborted or support pro-abortion measures, but you stick the taxpayers with the bill and you support people like Planned Parenthood? We better get this right and wonder who's really waging
True Commentary with Stu Epperson, author of the book, Last Words of Jesus. Available now in bookstores. Learn more at lastwordsofjesus.com.
Dr. Mark Stengler is a personal friend. He has been voted Doctor of the Decade, called America's Doctor. He loves Jesus, and his health supplements are second to none. I've used them for years. He's now partnering with our ministry. When you go to vitaminmission.com, you'll see a special code. You get a 10% discount on all your orders, and 10% of the order will be donated to our ministry. The place to go is vitaminmission.com.
Children in poverty, each one unique, each one full of dreams. They're our hope, our future. They're the reason Children International exists. When the whole world changed, we developed new ways to reach children and families in poverty during these vulnerable times.
I'm learning every day.
I'm healthy and strong.
To learn more, go to children.org/help today.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Get on The Line of Fire by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Welcome, friends, to the Line of Fire broadcast. Speaking to my good friend, Jonathan Cahn, about his brand new book, literally hot off the press, The Return of the Gods. Where's the best place for them to get the book, Jonathan?
You can get The Return of Gods everywhere. It's online. It's in every place. Amazon, if you go on right now, you'll see it. Walmart, Barnes & Noble. It's really literally everywhere.
Great. That's what I thought, but just wanted to ask the question. All right.
No, thank you.
So if gods or spirits are returning to the modern world, meaning the demonic powers have been active in different ways, but now making a more public, overt return, maybe coming out of hiding more, filling the void that you mentioned has been here because we had the gospel so much, we've rejected it so much, it's going to get filled with something else. Which gods are returning?
Yeah, and you know, Michael, it's the fact that we've had the gospel, the fact that we've had the presence of God and the ways of God, that has been a protection. That has been kind of a wall in many ways to the society. And that's, again, what's made us different. When you go to mission trips, you see that, you've seen the difference, although that's changing now. So the thing is that, America was patterned after ancient Israel, and, the Puritans were, very much so. On top of that, Western civilization, the spiritual heart of it, once the gospel came, is basically Israel. And so, so if it turns back, what happened when Israel turned away from God? It turned to the gods, and it turned to these things. Well, there were three key gods. I mean, there were many different ones from the nation, but three that really epitomize, what happened to Israel. And so in the book, in The Return of the Gods, I call them the Dark Trinity. And what it's saying here is that in the same way they have returned, and the first one is I call the possessor, because that's what his name means. Of course, you know it. The name most people know him as is Baal or Baal. This spirit is that of, in ancient Israel, this principality and this god was, in a sense, what caused Israel to forget God. That's what the Bible says. Baal caused to forget God. He was the anti-God. He's the chief of the Canaanite pantheon. He's the substitute God to God. He's the one who promises them, turn away, I'll give you freedom, I'll give you prosperity. And this is what the primary one they turn to. When you look at the list of gods, you see Baal is almost always first. Baal and then this. He's kind of like the spirit that comes back and then says, I'm going to bring the rest. And so the thing is that with what happens when you see a real turning in America, where it becomes really noticeable. Early 60s, we start removing God. We start taking God out of prayer out of school. We take then the word out of school, and then it begins on and on. We're opening the door. In a sense, it was almost like an exorcism of God from the culture. And the thing is that the parable says that if the house is not going to remain empty, you do that, something else is coming in its place. And I mean, if you look at when people were removing prayer from school in the 60s, at the very beginning, probably could have seemed like a little thing, but look at what has now come into school. This is the law of the spirit here. And so what happens is a spirit comes to America that is, or in power, really takes the mainstream, which is a spirit. Baal drove God out of the culture of Israel, drove him out of the public square. So we've been watching this culture driving God out and out and out. It hasn't stopped. It was noticeable then. It has happened. This is that spirit. It's a spirit of paganization. You see, when we're talking about pagan spirits or pagan gods. Well, if they're coming back now, they're coming to a Christian or a Judeo-Christian based nation. So the mission is to take a Christian or Judeo-Christian nation and paganize it, turn it into a pagan nation. And when we've been looking at the mass transformation of America since then, it is that way. In every direction is pagan. It's a paganization. So that's one part of what, the beginning of what Baal does, but it's actually very deep. It's affected our culture in the deepest ways.
Are there any literal outward signs about this invasion of Baal or Baal coming to America?
Yeah, yes. One thing actually, and this is something that, we kind of take for granted. We don't even think twice. But one of the key signs of Baal worship throughout the Middle East was the representation. He was represented by a molten bull, a bronze bull. This comes up again and again and again. And so interesting, and it's also linked, Baal is linked to prosperity, the prosperity of the nation. Well, the prosperity of our nation is linked to Wall Street, and when there's a prosperous market, we call it a bull market for other reasons. I'm not saying that anybody's doing it for that reason, but then, what was 1980s, they erect this massive molten bronze bull on Wall Street, or right off of Wall Street. This is actually, of course they're doing it because they're saying, well, this is for our prosperity on Wall Street. This is the sign of Baal. It's actually in the Bible. Even when we speak about golden calves, molten calves, those are bull calves in the Hebrew. It's all linked to the same thing. Not a good sign. Also, there was a time, Mike, I don't know if you caught it, you probably did, where they actually erected the arch that led to the Temple of Baal. In New York City. I mean, in New York City, they're doing it for, and I'm not saying that they're doing this for any reason that they have any idea of. It's just like the Harbinger. Why are they saying these scriptures? Why are they doing these things? But they do it anyway. And that arch also appeared in New York City, also appeared in Washington, overlooking the Capitol, just when they were having the hearings for the Supreme Court justice concerning abortion. So yes, there are and then there's the deeper ways. Like, for instance, in pagan culture, you have many gods. In biblical culture, of course, there's one God. But that means you have many truths. Not one truth, many truths. So everybody can now say, well, that's true for you. It's relative. I have my own truth. We take that as that's something progressive and woke. That's pagan. Even the idea that you can, in pagan culture, you create your own idol. You're creating your own God. You're creating your own truth. Well, this is my authentic truth. If a man says, I'm a tree or I'm a cat, well, that's his authentic truth. That is part of the the subjectification of culture. That is a pagan thing. So it has affected us, even wokeism and these things have affected us in the deepest of ways.
It reminds me of what G.K. Chesterton said, that when people don't believe in God, it's not that they believe in nothing, but in everything. And the sociologist Rodney Stark has demonstrated in countries, Sweden, Iceland, these different countries that are supposed to be very irreligious and turning from traditional religion, they believe in all kinds of superstition and the most bizarre things. But what we're seeing it in a very dangerous and dark way here. So you refer to go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like it's like it's never neutral. Spiritually and biblically, it's never neutral. And when you look at any culture that turns away from God, for instance, Russia, what comes in is demonic. I'm talking about the Soviet Union. Look at Germany. What comes in is demonic. And the thing, it also says, the parable says it's going to be worse. And when in the past, in the pagan world, you have Nero, but in the post-Christian world, you've got Hitler. So there's never going to be, and the house is never going to remain empty.
Yeah, that's it. I read one author the other day who said that thrones always get filled quickly, and that's their spiritual reality. Friends, all this is in the new book, just hot off the press, Return of the Gods, The Return of the Gods by Jonathan Cahn. All right, so you talk about the Dark Trinity, Baal, the possessor.
Yes.
Who's the enchantress?
Yeah, this is a she, of course, and this is, in Canaanite theology, it's actually a wife or consort of Baal, but she is all over. This in the Bible, she's called Ashtoreth or Ashtorah or Atoreth. And in Genesis, Baal and Ashtoreth. But in the Phoenician world, she's Astarte. In the Mediterranean or the Mesopotamian world, she's known very famously as Ishtar. Also, when she goes to Greece, becomes Aphrodite. When she gets to Rome, Venus. But very dark. This is the goddess of sexuality, of particularly sexual immorality, unbridled sexual lust. She's actually called a prostitute or a harlot goddess. And so when Israel fell, it wasn't just Baal, it was Ashtoreth. And so what happened is that it means that it's the sexualization of the culture. And when you look at the progression, Mike, first it says Baal, then it says Ashtoreth. Second, the first comes the turning, Baal, the turning away. And you have paganization, you have material, worship, all these things. But then if the next thing that's going to come, according to this template, is going to be the sexualization of American culture and Western culture and a sexual revolution. And that's exactly what happens when she comes into the culture. And we've been dealing with it ever since.
Yeah, and the fruit of it is extraordinary and dramatic. There was a song that swept America last year or the year before that. And it was so sexually explicit and so dark. You thought, how can you even comment on it? Because you can't read the lyrics, you can't watch the video, you can't hear it. And then you think, but little children across America are singing it. It was just a snapshot to me of how far things have gone. And then the aggressive educational agenda that wants to sexualize little children and give out condoms in elementary schools. You think, how did this happen? But this...
Yeah, it happened step by step by step. Back in the 60s, the big controversy is, could you even have sex education? And now look at where it's gone. And the thing is that one of the things is that, where did all this sexualization come from? Well, it comes from the marriage bed. It was taken out of the marriage bed. And this goddess, being a prostitute or harlot, is against marriage. One of the things she's detrimental to marriage, even in her mythology. And so this is what happens. Marriage starts getting weakened. Family is weakened. Divorce, starts going almost like clockwork. As on the same time, the culture gets sexualized.
Yeah, friends. This is a decline. The Return of the Gods opens this up vividly. It's one of these things. You think, oh my, there it is. We come back. Who is the destroyer? We'll get the answer from Jonathan Cahn, the new book, Return of the Gods. Stay right here. Hey friends, this is Dr. Michael Brown. We've been on the air 13 years daily, 5 days a week. We've never worked with a sponsor until now. Meet Dr. Mark Stengler, my personal friend, a lover of Jesus, voted Doctor of the Decade, and his health supplements are second to none. When you go to vitaminmission.com, you'll see a special code to put in. You get 10% off your orders, and a donation is made to our ministry with each order. vitaminmission.com.
I taught for 20 years, until I started forgetting my lectures.
Eventually, he had to quit. Getting his early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard, but it gave us time to take control of the situation together.
I can't imagine going through this without him.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
There are places with people in this world that are without any hope. That is, until Mercy Ships arrives. Mercy Ships is a place restoring sight to the blind, healing to the deformed, acceptance and help to the outcast, and love to the brokenhearted.
And many times, you can almost see the life coming back into them. Can't beat that.
Mercy Ships is the largest floating civilian hospital in the world, staffed with some of the most skilled volunteer medical professionals and crew. Mercy Ships brings hope, healing, and love to the lost and forgotten in the world. To learn more, go to mercyships.org today.
Okay, I'll be right there, guys. Hey. Oh, Deb, come on in. I thought you were the radon test guys.
The who test guys?
Didn't you see the paper Sunday? The the Surgeon General issued another warning.
Oh, like the cigarette warning?
Exactly. Only now they're saying radon causes lung cancer. For non-smokers like us, radon is the #1 cause of lung cancer.
You're kidding me, right? I have a smoke-free home and my family can still get cancer from radon?
Yep. That's why the Surgeon General says every home should be tested for radon.
But I don't smell any radon in my house.
No, nobody can smell radon. It's odorless, colorless, and tasteless. It just comes up from underground and seeps into your house.
Oh, great.
No, hey, it's no big deal. Even if they find high levels of radon, it can easily be fixed. My brother just had his house fixed. Now that's the radon test, guys.
So how did you find them?
First, you go to the EPA website.
Learn more. Visit the EPA at epa.gov/radon. That's epa.gov/radon.
Mommy, I'll get it. Oh, I'll be right there.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Get on The Line of Fire by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Thanks for joining us on The Line of Fire. I'm speaking with my friend and colleague, Jonathan Cahn, his hot-off-the-press book, The Return of the Gods. Jonathan, before we talk about the last of the three beings, demonic powers that you're referring to as the Dark Trinity, a little bit more about Ashtoreth, Ishtar, the Enchantress. How does this connect with porn, with drugs, with witchcraft?
Yes. Yeah. Well, her name, she was known as the prostitute goddess, and her name in ancient Greek for prostitute is porne. We get the word porn from it. And so the very first pornography in the world was the writings of this linked to this goddess. It was literally the earliest literature on that. And actually, and her effect, or the effect of this principality, was also to reproduce images of naked people throughout the culture. Back then, they didn't have the web. Of course, they had clay, but that's the same thing. And we use the word erotic, which of course comes from Eros. Eros was a Greek god who was born of Aphrodite, who is Ishtar, the goddess. So she actually produces it's not only linked to porn, but also the word Eros. And so if Baal is moving to the paganization, that's it, of a Christian or Judeo-Christian nation, Ishtar is doing that through the sexual realm. And if you look at one of the most powerful realms of really paganizing America has been the sexual realm. All of it's moving in that area. Also, she's called the Enchantress and a sorceress because she is also the goddess of spells and casting spells on people. And so at the same time that you have the sexual revolution in the 60s, you also have a revival of the occult, to the point, and even now we have more witches in America than we have Presbyterians. So the revival of the New Age, well, that's not an accident that these all come at the same time that we're turning away from God. And she's also the goddess of the tavern and the intoxicating substances. And you also, at the same time, you have an explosion of drugs. We still have an explosion of drugs right now. All these things are linked to this goddess.
Yeah, I remember reading some of those stats about the rise of witchcraft in recent years, and compared to Presbyterians or millennial Presbyterians being outnumbered by which it was just wild. But you see these things happening together. Those were some of the lights that went on for me writing Jezebel's War with America. What you're looking is, okay, we're not just dealing with this, but this and this and this. So the last in this Dark Trinity, the destroyer, who is that?
Yeah, and by the way, you just triggered something in me. And Jezebel was, in the history, at least in as it's recorded, is supposed to have been the daughter of the priest of Astarte, which is this goddess, Ashtoreth. Same thing. Now the last one, one of the things that is actually not an exception in pagan culture, but it's actually the rule in many ways. But human sacrifice is actually very common in pagan culture, and child sacrifice is very common in pagan culture. I mean, we're talking about whether it's human sacrifice, the German lands, the Russian lands, the Polynesian lands, it was all over. And to be a child in pagan culture was dangerous. And this is the god or the principality that causes parents to offer up their own children as sacrifice. Of course, we know him as Molech, which we believe is linked to the word king. And when Israel turned away from God, this is what they did. It says they caused their children to pass through the fire. They offered them up, which is what the pagan world was doing. So following this pattern or template. First, you have Baal representing the turning away from God and paganization. Secondly, you have the sexual revolution and all that's happened. Then you're going to have this. And so when you look at it, you have the 60s, and then at the end of the 60s comes abortion to America and the West. Abortion on demand, 1970. Abortion, of course, legalized 1973. You have the offering up of children. And by the way, it wasn't just infanticide, which you had then. You also had abortion. It was part of the pagan world. It was actually the gospel that ended infanticide. It was actually the gospel that ended human sacrifice across the world. So if we're turning away from God, then this spirit or this God, this Moloch, is going to come to America. And that is exactly what's happened. And people say, well, how can you compare it? Well, yeah, they offered up thousands. We have offered up millions.
Yeah, and with it, just the larger denigrating of human life that comes out of it. It's clearly related. Now, Jonathan, in The Return of the Gods, because we're running through a whole lot in an hour, and it's eye-opening, it's shaking, it's intense. It reminds us that we have a spiritual battle. But you give a lot of data and information in the book.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I had to research the inscriptions from the ancient, from Babylon, Mesopotamia, and then what is actually happening here, happening now. We're replaying that. Even like we're talking about, abortion. Even the way they, you know what, Mike, you also, I know you also did this. But even the ways they offer them up, there are parallels to what we are doing to this day. So yes, and it gets deeper because what happened is at the beginning when this thing begins, when the gods, in a sense, the spirits start taking hold, it's all in the name of tolerance. But as it progresses, it gets deeper, and it's going to open up exactly with what we're dealing right now, even with gender.
Yeah, even when we talk about the society says abortion is a right, spelled RIGHT. It really becomes a right, RITE. It becomes a religious right, ritual, and the passion, intensity behind it exposes it. So when you're talking about the enchantress, the connection with sexual immorality and drugs, Eastern religion, we saw that happen. Witchcraft, we saw it just sweep in the 60s. I remember living through it. Is there another side to this demonic activity?
Yes, and it's a side that comes out more in time when there's a greater foothold. It couldn't come out at the beginning, and that is that when I looked at this, Mike, and I'm looking at the writings of this god, linked to this goddess in the inscription, she says, "I am a woman, I am a man." Her hymns say she has the power to turn a man into a woman and a woman into a man. This is the goddess or the principality that blurs gender, that blurs sexuality, that bends the line between man and woman. And so big time, and so what if we were going to see this at work in America and the West? What we're going to see in time is going to be not just a sexual revolution, but it's going to turn another side. We're going to start seeing the blending of gender, the feminizing of men, the masculizing of women, and we have been seeing this. I mean, it's not only in the sexual realm; it's been in every realm. I mean, if a man acts masculine, we'll say that's toxic. If a woman acts masculine, we'll say, well, that's wonderful. What is that? It is a spirit that is seeking to basically really end the distinction between the two. One of the things I found when I was looking up the inscriptions linked to the goddess is that she grinds away the masculinity of men. She hands weapons to women. So it's to seek to do that, and that's been happening. That part has been happening since the 60s. I mean, so in society, actually, even the spirit of radical feminism is linked. She raged against the authority of men. She had a problem with that. So in every way you see this. Even the rechanneling of girls from they're being programmed in this. So our boys are being programmed against being providing, against all these things are being channeled into video games and into pornography, and so it's all part of that. But it actually affects the sexual realm has become the most dramatic.
I wrote an article a couple months back for the Daily Wire on sociological contagion and the transgender revolution. And it was talking about how things sweep through a society, kind of like the society corporately loses its mind. So we've got genital mutilation of young people now and hormone blockers that are going to destroy their lives and sterilize them, and people shouting for it. This needs to happen, and on and on. And you think, how does a madness happen? Well, I know part of it can be explained sociologically, but I'm quite sure that behind all this is demonic spirits driving it. And you're saying it's not a surprise that this is something we should have expected in terms of the progression.
Yes, that's exactly how I would say it. And not that we did, but that we should have, because this is where it goes. This is where it has to go. And starting with when you take God out, we say, like, what possesses an adult to do this to a child? Well, this is what possesses them. It is a spirit. Even Michael, even liberals, old school liberals, as you know, and others are saying this is demonic. And the thing is, the goddess had a priesthood, and the priesthood of the goddess, it all goes back to this, that were men dressed up as women, and they dressed as women, they spoke as women, and they even had sexual relations as women. So if she returns, or if the effect of this spirit, it's going to be that of androgyny. And so cross-dressing, it says literally, her hymns say she dresses a man as a woman, she dresses a woman as a man. So we have drag queens now. That goes back to her priesthood, and it's gone from Western society because of the gospel. Well, the fact that it's coming back into the mainstream is a sign of this spirit coming back. And the other thing is the fact that it's going after children. One of the things I've noticed as I'm doing this is that these principalities always go after the children, because you get the children, you have the future, and children are the most easily malleable, bendable. And one of the things that happened is her priesthood wasn't just men dressing as women; they were also men who were transitioned as women surgically, and which affected their hormones. In fact, when I looked at what was there in the ancient writings, it says that these changed men would dance before her holding scalpels, which they believe was linked to the fact of transitioning. She's the goddess who transitions. And so now, back then it was her priesthood. But, Jesus said when they come back, it's going to be worse. Well, now it's not. She's not just after a priesthood. She's after an entire generation.
Yeah, you know what's fascinating as we talk? It was in 2004 that God called me to begin to really focus on gay and lesbian activism. The transgender part was not as prominent then. But I saw right then when I had compassion for the people and love for those involved, and a great burden for them I never had before, that the agenda was the principal threat to freedom of religion, speech, and conscience in America, and that it was going to target children and so on. So everything that I've watched unfold in these last 18 years, right now, all we're doing is plugging in spiritual realities behind each and every development. And as you're talking and giving these specifics, I'm thinking of what I've witnessed and documented and seen, and even where the agenda was going, according to those within it. What they didn't understand was it was a dark agenda, not a liberating agenda. And what we have to remember is the people worship these beings, these deities, thinking it was for their good, but instead they put themselves under bondage.
Yeah. The people, we have to pray. We're all in the same boat in one sense or another. We have to pray for that. And you've been very, very clear about that and very strong about that. And there's even, we'll keep going.
Yeah, we'll go on the other side of the break. Jonathan Cahn, The Return of the Gods. I don't know about you, but this is deeply stirring. Recognizing the spiritual war, this is deeply stirring. We'll be right back.
We live in an on-demand world. Time, weather, meals, and content. That's why the Truth Network has the Truth Podcast Network. Some of your favorite Truth Network programs, plus some that are podcast only. Rich content that is rich in the Word.
If Not For God podcast with Mike Zwick, God takes men from rock bottom to the kingdom of God and turns hopelessness to hope. Stories to encourage you what might have been if not for God. If Not For God podcast with Mike Zwick at truthnetwork.com.
From Love Worth Finding, here's Adrian Rogers with a treasure from the Word.
Satan is a craftsman when it comes to telling lies. The cleverest lies always sound the most like the truth. Now, anybody can tell a lie and not be a good liar. Even a clock that doesn't run is right twice a day, isn't that right? And a clever lie sounds the most like the truth. Therefore, a clock that is 5 minutes wrong is far more dangerous than a clock that doesn't run at all and right twice a day. A clock that's 5 minutes wrong is so near the right time that it can cause you to miss that airplane or be late for that vital appointment. If you look at a clock 5 hours wrong, you say, that must be wrong. Somebody tell me what time it is. But the clock that is 5 minutes wrong is the most dangerous. Now, Satan tells the cleverest lies, and the cleverest lies are the most like the truth, and yet they are diabolical lies. Not only is he the most clever liar, but he tells his lies about the biggest subject, God. Satan wants you to get a wrong conception of God, because if you get a wrong conception of God, he's got you where he wants you.
For more about Love Worth Finding and Adrian Rogers, visit our website at lwf.org.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Get on The Line of Fire by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Well, this always happens when I interview my friend Jonathan. We don't get through the list of questions, and the list of questions just gives you kind of like a little drink of a cup out of an ocean of content. So for everything here to dig in deeper, get the book Return of the Gods. You can get it anywhere books are sold. Basically, it is available in multiple platforms, multiple forms. Jonathan, I want to give some hope, some encouragement as well. Because this is very jarring and very intense, and it's the world that we live in. When we sit down privately and talk, these are the things that we talk about. Yeah. But I want to focus on one or two specifics and then get to broader picture. Where's this going? Is there hope? So what happened that, in your view, kind of exploded on the streets of New York City and has affected the world? How does this tie in with some of these ancient truths and mysteries that you're revealing?
Yeah, the whole movement, as you know, Mike, the whole movement of pride of altered sexuality began or exploded in Stonewall, the Stonewall riots in New York City. And I won't go into detail because there's just not time. But the amazing thing I saw is it was filled, saturated with the signs of this deity or this spirit. Example, this Ishtar, the goddess, was linked always to what was called the Eshtam. That means a tavern or an alehouse or a bar. That was Stonewall. But when she went to war, it was linked to the lion's head. I won't go into it, but that night was linked to a lion's head. There was a woman who actually stirred up the whole event. This is everything we're dealing with has come from there. The goddess was called the Storm. She was called, you are the loud thundering storm. The woman's name was Storm or Storme. There's something called the dance of the goddess when the goddess goes to war, and they literally was a dance that broke out that night among the writers, and what they said, they sang words that went back to the writings of the goddess. It even says of the goddess, you are the stone that breaks the stone wall. The stone wall. They were trying to do it. Even the timing of that was linked to the ancient pagan calendar. So that's just in a very, very quick nutshell.
Yeah, and so much did explode out of that Stonewall, and how remarkable that in President Obama's second inaugural speech that he hailed Stonewall. He hailed Seneca for women's rights, Stonewall for gay rights, Selma for civil rights. These were now, instead of Stonewall being a riot that broke out that led to all kinds of lawlessness and really put an emphasis on sexual revolution, this is now something being celebrated. All right, so in your view, again, we're just scratching the surface here, but in your view, where are things going, and is there hope?
Yeah, well, let me just mention, and then absolutely that from Stonewall, came the parades, the whole parades of June. Well, the parades are linked to the goddess. She was the goddess of parades, and the parades of the goddess had men parading as women and women parading as men. Even the time of the goddess, there was one time when this happened, and the ancient commentators record that there was 1 month of the year where she particularly it possessed the culture. It was Tammuz, but they actually identified it in the ancient writings as Junium or June. Even, I won't go into it, but even the rainbow is linked to the goddess. It's a sign of that. And I'll say just one quick thing, and that is that even the Supreme Court decision since then, 2003, 2013, and then marriage being redefined in 2015, they all took place in the days of the goddess, actually on the same dates. And when, if you remember, when marriage was struck down, as we know it, and all over America there were rainbows on the White House, that night was the 10th of Tammuz, which is on the ancient calendar of Babylon. It says that's the day appointed to cast a spell to cause a man to love a man. So the point is, we are in a war. We're in a warfare, not against people, but against principalities. And it's a real war. It's a real thing. The last part of the book, I speak about that war and where this is heading, and that where it's heading is that the gods are never content with just tolerance. Ultimately, it's every knee shall bow. And they also have a vendetta regarding Christians or the word, because that's what drove them out. So we have to be strong. To me, we are still in exciting times. It goes all with the end times. This is where it's all going, and we have to be strong. When you look back at the Bible, Elijah dealt with the gods, Moses dealt with the gods of Egypt, the Maccabees dealt with the gods of Greece, Paul dealt with the gods of Rome. So this is not a strange thing in that sense, but we have to be strong, and we have to stand, and we have to not bow our knee, and we have to. It is the power of God. The last part of the book is the hope, the other God. He is greater than the gods. Who is like Micha Mocha? Who is like you, God, among the gods? The power of the God is so much stronger. But we have to rise in it. We can't be intimidated. We cannot bow down to the gods.
Yeah, so if someone said, all right, listen, we all know that we're in spiritual warfare. What will I get by reading this book that will take me deeper? It's a question people ask us. Say, well, we know we're involved in spiritual warfare. Why do I need to understand this? What's so important about grasping this?
Yeah, because it's not just something you'll hear about in a seminar of spiritual warfare, which is very important, but it's seeing how it's affecting everything in the culture, how it affects that, how it's affecting your children, how, where this is coming in, where it's coming from. This is not some general thing. This is an exact, precise thing, and this is what was dealt with in the Bible. And so I'm hoping people they not only get the return of the gods for themselves, but they get it for people in their lives, even people who are not saved and who are part of this, because everybody is affected by it. Everybody has somebody in their life that is very affected by it, and to take charge over it and take power over it. And if you know what you're dealing with, you can fight effectively by the power of God.
Does this also remind us that our greatest battle is not political?
Yeah, and of course it affects everything politically, of course, but we can never make that our main thing. It never was, but it is, as Paul said, we war not against flesh and blood, we war against principalities. And as believers, this is the time that we can be the strongest. We can become radical. I mean, radical in love, radical in boldness, radical in purity. That's what's going to do it. It was the power of Messiah that cast these things out. It's the power of Messiah that way too, but also in our own lives, because if we are part of these things, whether it's pornography, whether it's whatever it is, then how are we going to fight against it? So it's a call for repentance among the body. If we have to separate, just like Gideon had to cast down that idol. We have to do that in order that we can fight like the people of God spiritually for God, and God is still on the throne. It's just it is again, Mike, I think who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? But we have to stand in that power. We have to be strong. This is our moment.
Yeah, absolutely so. Absolutely so. What a critically important message. What critically important insights putting this together. My PhD is in Near Eastern Languages and Literatures from New York University. And one thing that struck me reading ancient inscriptions decades ago in grad school was how applicable things were. It's like, wow, this is a demonic entity that's active now, but it's being described the same way in the ancient world because these are real demonic beings, but Jesus is Lord, and we have victory in him. Obviously, the book is already captivating people. Readers are having their eyes open. May this help spark awakening in America. That is the only hope of the nation, awakening among God's people. Hey, thank you for writing the book. May we see a massive holy exorcism of demonic powers in the days ahead.
Amen, Michael. Thank you. And that's what I'm praying for. I pray people get the book, but also that they're praying for exactly that.
Yeah. Thanks so much for giving us your time today. I appreciate it. God bless.
God bless you.
All right. Always a tremendous joy to have Jonathan Cahn with us, and especially knowing when his books come out, he's swamped with interviews. So it's very gracious of him to reach out to me normally months in advance, and we put this on the calendar in anticipation. So friends, get hold of the book. And his book actually came out yesterday, same day as mine came out, Political Seduction of the Church. So I'm thrilled with the interest in the political seduction of the church. They really go hand in hand in many ways. But yeah, Jonathan's is a little bit ahead of mine on the bestseller list. I remember we both spoke at Family Research Council, Jonathan and I, a few years back, and brought our messages there. And then we were doing a book signing that same day. And I had a good line at my table. People wanted me to sign the book that we had there, but it was a whole lot shorter than Jonathan's line. Something happened when The Harbinger came out. And when people say to me, well, Mike, did you agree with the contents? And what do you think of the book? I said, listen, you don't have to agree with every single point. But the fact that book instantly became a New York Times bestseller, when Jonathan was a relatively unknown author then, known in some circles in the Messianic Jewish movement, but otherwise unknown nationally, for that book to immediately the first week become a New York Times bestseller and stay there for a year, these things just don't happen. And I told people, whether you agree with every line or not, this is a wake-up call. God is shouting through my brother, a wake-up call to America, and judgment is in our land. And demonic powers are at work in the land. And there's been favor on his other books. A lot of eyes have been opened. So you may take issue with a point here. Look at the big picture that's being painted and recognize what's going on and the spiritual battle we're involved in. And let us give ourselves not to focus on demonic powers and these false gods, but to focus on the reality of the battle so that we take hold of Jesus afresh. We take hold of the power of the Spirit. We ground ourselves in the Word of God. We turn away from unclean practices and from mingling with demonic power and give ourselves afresh to God in the Great Commission. We can still see America shaken. Yes, these are urgent times. Yes, we're under judgment. Yes, it's distressing to see what's happening. But Jesus remains Lord. Let us equip ourselves for the spiritual battle and see him exalted. Back with you, friends, tomorrow for Thoroughly Jewish Thursday.
You can't